Commander Narration never expected her morning coffee ritual to cause an interstellar incident. The International Space Station Alpha had been hosting the first Zillion delegation for precisely 3 Earth weeks when the situation unfolded. The Zillions, with their crystalline bodies and neural networks that absorbed energy directly from background radiation, had never encountered a species that required regular liquid sustenance. That morning started like any other aboard the station. Sarah floated through the familiar corridors to the station's galley, her movements practiced and precise in zero gravity. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the station's specialized brewing system filled the compact space. This wasn't the instant coffee of early space missions. Humanity had long since decided that real coffee was a necessity for long-term space operations. The Zillion observers, Ambassador Tal and Science Officer VRXX, drifted into the galley just as Sarah was performing her ritual. Their crystalline forms caught the station's lights, creating dancing rainbows across the walls. They watched, fascinated, as she carefully added a precise amount of cream to her coffee, the white liquid creating a mesmerizing spiral in the dark brew. Commander Chin, Tal's translated voice emerged from their communication crystal. "We observe you performing this action every station morning. Is this a religious ceremony?" Sarah chuckled, taking her first sip of coffee. "Not religious, Ambassador. Just breakfast. Though some might say humans do worship coffee." The Zillion's crystal matrices flickered with confusion, their equivalent of raised eyebrows. "You introduce foreign substances into your body, for pleasure?" VRXX asked, their tone suggesting they were documenting what must have seemed like bizarre behavior. "For pleasure, for energy, for comfort," Sarah explained, realizing this conversation might be more significant than she'd initially thought. Coffee helps humans wake up, focus, and start their day. It's also social. Sharing coffee is a way we bond with others. The concept of consuming something for multiple interconnected purposes, biological, social, and emotional, seemed to short-circuit the Zillion's logical frameworks. Their crystalline forms vibrated at frequencies that the station's sensors had never recorded before. "Fascinating and disturbing," Tal announced. "Your species deliberately creates chemical dependencies for social bonding purposes? This requires immediate study. The implications for understanding human psychology are enormous." Sarah realized she had inadvertently sparked a first contact situation over her morning coffee. "It's not exactly a dependency," she began, but the Zillions were already transmitting rapid-fire data bursts to their homeworld. Within hours, the station's communication systems were overwhelmed with requests from Zillion scientists, sociologists, and cultural experts. They wanted to know everything: the history of coffee cultivation, the biochemistry of caffeine, the development of coffee drinking rituals across human cultures, the role of coffee houses in human social and political movements. The station's human crew found themselves becoming impromptu cultural ambassadors, explaining everything from why some preferred their coffee black to the significance of meeting someone for coffee. Dr. James Rodriguez, the station's botanist, was particularly amused when he had to explain that humans had developed hundreds of different ways to prepare coffee beans, each with its own cultural significance. "So let me get this straight," Tal said during an impromptu diplomatic session in the observation module. "Humans discovered a bitter substance that initially made them feel strange, decided they liked how it made them feel, cultivated it extensively, developed countless preparation methods, built social institutions around it, and now use it as both a vital morning ritual and a means of diplomatic interaction." "That's actually a pretty good summary," Sarah admitted, sipping her third coffee of the day. "Though you make it sound much more dramatic than it feels to us." "But it is dramatic," VRXX interjected, their crystalline form literally glowing with excitement. "Your species has transformed a simple biological process, the need for sustenance, into an intricate web of social, cultural, and diplomatic practices. This is unprecedented in our studies of sentient species." As Sarah watched the Zillions document every detail of her coffee consumption, she realized that humanity's relationship with food and drink might be more remarkable than anyone had previously considered. What seemed mundane to humans, the simple pleasure of a morning coffee, was revolutionary to a species that had evolved beyond the need for physical sustenance. The day ended with the Zillion High Council officially requesting a permanent cultural exchange program focused on human food rituals. Sarah's morning coffee had opened up new avenues of interstellar diplomacy that no one could have predicted. As she prepared for sleep cycle, she couldn't help but smile at the thought that humanity's first major contribution to galactic civilization might not be their technology or their resilience, but their ability to turn simple sustenance into an art form. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a galaxy-wide fascination with human food culture that would change interstellar relations forever. 6 months after the coffee incident, as it became known in diplomatic circles, the Galactic Council established the first human culinary research institute on Europa Station. Dr. Maya Patel stood in the center of the massive experimental kitchen, surrounded by representatives from 12 different alien species, all eager to understand why humans had maintained their primitive eating habits long after they had the technology to efficiently synthesize nutrients. The Institute's first major experiment was already causing controversy. Maya had proposed a radical idea, having alien researchers actually attempt to eat human food. The medical screening alone had taken 3 months, ensuring that human biochemistry wouldn't prove toxic to the volunteer subjects. Today, Maya announced to the assembled group, "We're going to explore one of humanity's most beloved comfort foods, chocolate chip cookies." She held up a freshly baked cookie, still warm from the oven. The aroma filled the room, causing the human observers to smile nostalgically while their alien counterparts registered varying degrees of confusion and concern. The Meridian researcher, Dr. Axel, whose species communicated through bioluminescent patterns, flashed a sequence that the translators rendered as, "The concept of comfort food remains particularly puzzling. How can the act of chemistry provide emotional support?" Maya smiled, breaking the cookie in half to show the melted chocolate chips. "That's exactly what we're here to discover. Your species evolved beyond the need for physical eating, but humans turn necessity into an art form. We don't just eat for survival, we eat to remember, to celebrate, to comfort, to connect." The first volunteer was a young Vesperian named Zyra, whose insectoid features betrayed no emotion as she approached the table. Her species had evolved to extract nutrients directly from mineral deposits, making the concept of prepared food entirely foreign to her. "Remember," Maya instructed, "focus on the experience. The temperature, the texture, the taste, how it makes you feel." She handed Zyra the cookie piece. The room fell silent as Zyra took her first bite. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her antennae began to quiver, and her compound eyes widened. The monitoring equipment recorded a surge of neural activity unlike anything previously documented in Vesperian physiology. Zyra's translator crackled with unusual static. "I experience memories that are not mine. Feelings, warmth, safety. How is this possible?" The scientific team rushed to analyze the readings while Maya explained, "The human brain forms strong associations between food and memory. What you're experiencing might be a combination of the sensory input and the chemical reactions triggered by the ingredients." One by one, the other volunteers tried the cookies. Each reaction was unique but shared a common thread. They all reported experiencing emotional responses that their species had believed themselves incapable of feeling through mere sustenance. The Quantum Collective, a high-mind species represented by a cluster of floating light points, was particularly affected. "We have achieved unity through technological means," their synchronized voice announced. "But this creates unity through shared experience. Inefficient, yet beautiful." As the experiment continued, Maya noticed something unexpected. The aliens weren't just studying the food, they were starting to share it with each other, commenting on their experiences, forming connections. Without realizing it, they had begun to participate in one of humanity's oldest social rituals. The breakthrough came when Dr. Axel, who had been the most skeptical, suddenly emitted a pattern of lights that the translator couldn't process. When asked to explain, they said, "For the first time in our species' history, we understand why your kind resisted the efficiency of nutrient synthesis. This is not about sustenance. This is about joy." News of the experiment spread quickly through the galactic community. Species that had long viewed humans as endearingly primitive began to reconsider their stance. The ability to transform simple molecular compounds into experiences that transcended physical necessity was being hailed as a unique form of technology, one that operated on both biological and psychological levels. Maya found herself working overtime to accommodate the flood of new research requests. The Institute expanded its programs to include studies of various human culinary traditions, their historical significance, and their potential applications in interstellar diplomacy. The most surprising development came from the Vesperian High Council. After reviewing Zyra's experience, they proposed a controversial initiative to reintroduce optional physical eating alongside their traditional mineral absorption, specifically for its social and emotional benefits. As Maya documented these developments in her research log, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. Humanity had spent centuries trying to prove their worth to the galactic community through their technology, their art, their philosophy. Yet in the end, it was something as simple as a chocolate chip cookie that showed the galaxy that humans possessed a form of advancement all their own, one that transformed mere survival into an expression of creativity, community, and joy. The Institute's success marked the beginning of a new era in human-alien relations. As more species began to explore human culinary culture, they discovered that what they had dismissed as primitive biological requirements were actually sophisticated tools for building connections and experiencing life in all its messy, inefficient, beautiful complexity. NX Vera, a young Solarian anthropologist, had always prided herself on her scientific detachment. Her species, evolved from pure energy, had long ago transcended physical form, making her current solid-state manifestation nothing more than a research tool. She had volunteered for the Human Culinary Research Institute's immersion program purely for academic purposes. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. 3 months into her research on Earth, she found herself sitting in a small family-owned restaurant in Tokyo, about to participate in what humans called a family dinner. Her host, elderly restaurant owner Keiko Tanaka, had insisted on closing early to properly introduce NX Vera to traditional Japanese cuisine. In my family, Keiko explained while carefully forming rice balls with practiced hands, recipes are stories. Each dish carries memories of those who cooked it before. She worked with quiet precision, her movements carrying the weight of generations. NX Vera's sensory apparatus, specifically designed for this mission, recorded everything with perfect clarity. Yet somehow, the data felt inadequate to capture the moment. The steam rising from the rice, the precise way Keiko's hands moved, the subtle changes in her expression as she worked, these seemed to convey something beyond mere technical documentation. "This is how my grandmother taught me," Keiko continued, placing a completed onigiri before NX Vera. "And her grandmother taught her. When you eat this, you're not just tasting rice and nori, you're tasting history." The concept should have been nonsensical to NX Vera. Her people measured history in stellar cycles and quantum fluctuations, not in such tiny, personal moments. Yet as she lifted the rice ball to her specially designed intake port, something unexpected happened. The first taste triggered a cascade of sensory information that her system struggled to process. But beyond the expected chemical analysis, something else emerged, an emotional response that should have been impossible for her species. She experienced not just flavors, but feelings, the warmth of family gatherings, the patience of teaching hands, the love embedded in carefully prepared food. "This is..." NX Vera's voice modulation wavered. "This is not just sustenance. I am experiencing memories? Emotions? But how? I don't have the biological structures for such responses." Keiko smiled knowingly. "Some things go beyond biology. When we prepare food with love, something of ourselves goes into it. My grandmother used to say that's why family recipes can't be perfectly replicated. They need the hearts of those who cook them." The scientific part of NX Vera's mind raced to rationalize the experience. Perhaps her sensory apparatus was malfunctioning. Perhaps she was interpreting standard data patterns incorrectly. But as Keiko continued to serve dish after dish, each with its own story, its own history, NX Vera found her carefully maintained scientific detachment crumbling. Word of her experience spread quickly through the scientific community. Other Solarians, initially skeptical, requested permission to duplicate her research. The prevailing theory had been that human attachment to traditional food preparation was a sign of cultural stagnation. Now, they faced evidence that humans had developed a way to encode emotional and cultural information into their very sustenance. The breakthrough came during a formal presentation to the Galactic Scientific Council. NX Vera, struggling to maintain her usual professional distance, finally admitted what she had discovered. We have been wrong about human advancement. While we pursued technological transcendence, they achieved something perhaps more remarkable. They found a way to make the act of biological necessity carry the weight of their stories, their histories, their very souls. She presented her findings, including recordings of meals shared with families across Earth. Each showed the same pattern: humans using food not just for sustenance, but as a medium for preserving and transmitting cultural memory, emotional connections, and social bonds. What we dismissed as primitive necessity, she concluded, is actually a sophisticated system of cultural preservation and emotional communication. Humans haven't failed to transcend their biological needs. They've transformed those needs into an art form that accomplishes what our most advanced technology still cannot: the direct transmission of emotional experience through multiple sensory channels simultaneously. The implications were staggering. Species that had long since abandoned physical food began to reconsider their choices. Some suggested that in pursuing pure efficiency, they might have lost something valuable: the ability to create and share experiences that transcended mere data transmission. Keiko's small restaurant became an unexpected pilgrimage site for alien researchers. She accepted them all with the same warm smile, sharing not just food, but the stories and memories woven into each dish. Her tiny kitchen became a laboratory where the galaxy's most advanced species rediscovered something they had forgotten: the profound connection between sustenance and soul. As for NX Vera, she found herself returning to that small Tokyo restaurant again and again. Her official research was complete, but something kept drawing her back. Perhaps it was the way Keiko's eyes crinkled when she smiled, or how she now adjusted her recipes slightly to account for NX Vera's unique sensory capabilities. Or perhaps it was simply that in this small, steam-filled space, she had discovered that even beings of pure energy could hunger for something more than mere sustenance. The invitation to the first Galactic Culinary Summit seemed innocent enough. Humanity, recently admitted to the Galactic Council, had proposed a diplomatic gathering centered around the sharing of food, a concept that would soon shake the foundations of interstellar politics. Admiral Helena Martinez stood in the Grand Hall of the newly constructed Solar Diplomatic Center on Mars, watching as delegates from across the galaxy arrived. The space was filled with tables groaning under the weight of Earth's finest cuisines, everything from paella to pho, from injera to sushi. The aromas mingled in the carefully controlled atmosphere, creating what she hoped would be an inviting environment for their guests. "Admiral," her aide whispered urgently, "the Axiomites are threatening to withdraw from the Council over this display." He gestured to the feast before them. "They're calling it a provocative demonstration of biological primitiveness." The Axiomites, a species that had evolved to subsist on pure mathematical equations, had always been among the most vocal critics of human culture. Their representative, first calculator theorem, hovered near the entrance, their crystalline form pulsing with what Helena had learned to recognize as disgust. "This is an outrage," Theorem's translated voice resonated through the hall. "You invite us to celebrate the very biological chains you refuse to transcend? This is not diplomacy. This is a deliberate insult to evolved species." Before Helena could respond, Dr. Maya Patel from the Human Culinary Research Institute stepped forward. "With respect, first calculator, we invite you to celebrate not our limitations, but our transformative power. Humans have turned basic biological need into art, community, and diplomatic tools." The argument might have ended there if not for the unexpected intervention of NX Vera, the Solarian anthropologist who had become something of a celebrity after her controversial research on human food culture. She materialized in the center of the hall, her energy form more focused than usual. "I must speak," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of scientific authority. "My research has shown that human food culture represents not a failure to evolve, but rather an evolution along a different path. They have developed a sophisticated system of chemical, emotional, and cultural transmission that many of our species lost in our rush to transcend physical form." The hall erupted in debate. The quantum collective buzzed with rapid calculations, while the Vesperian delegation's antennae quivered in agitation. The Zillions, who had started the whole food culture controversy with the coffee incident, moved their crystalline forms into what humans had learned was their equivalent of an academic discussion formation. First calculator theorem's form pulsed with increasing intensity. "You suggest we should praise them for remaining bound to primitive biological functions? Next, you'll propose we revert to cellular division." Actually, a new voice cut through the chaos. It was Keiko Tanaka, the Japanese restaurant owner who had first helped NX Vera understand the deeper meaning of human food. She had been invited as a cultural representative, though until now, she had remained quietly observing. "Food is not about being bound to anything," Keiko continued, her voice gentle but firm. "It is about choice. Every day, we choose to make the act of eating more than mere sustenance. We choose to infuse it with meaning, with art, with love. Is that not also a form of transcendence?" Her words triggered a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Even Theorem's hostile pulsing slowed slightly, taking on a more contemplative rhythm. Helena seized the moment. "We propose an experiment," she announced. "Those who are physically capable and willing may participate in this feast not as a biological necessity, but as an exploration of an alternative form of evolution, one that transforms basic needs into tools for connection and understanding." What followed would be debated in council chambers for years to come. One by one, delegates who had never experienced physical food began to approach the tables. The quantum collective, unable to eat in their usual form, created temporary physical manifestations to participate. Even some of the axiomites, after lengthy calculations, decided that direct observation was necessary for complete understanding. The turning point came when first calculator theorem, after watching others for hours, approached a simple bowl of miso soup. The entire hall held its breath as the axiomite leader extended a temporarily manifested sensory appendage into the steam rising from the bowl. The reaction was immediate and unprecedented. Theorem's crystalline form began to resonate at frequencies that created haunting harmonies throughout the hall. "This is inefficient," they announced. "Illogical. Unnecessarily complex." A pause. "And yet, I begin to understand." The inefficiency itself carries meaning. The complexity is beautiful. That moment marked a profound shift in galactic politics. The feast that had threatened to cause a diplomatic crisis instead became a turning point in interspecies understanding. Species that had long since abandoned physical form began to develop new appreciation for different types of evolution and advancement. As the event concluded, Helena found herself standing with Keiko, Maya, and NX Vera, watching as delegates continued to explore and discuss their experiences. "You know," Keiko said softly, "my grandmother used to say that the best way to understand someone is to share a meal with them. I never imagined that would apply to beings who don't even need to eat." Helena smiled, watching as a group of quantum collective members earnestly discussed the philosophy of dessert with a Vesperian researcher. Maybe that's exactly why it works. Sometimes the things we don't need are the ones that teach us the most about who we are. The Great Feast incident, as it came to be known, would be remembered not as a diplomatic crisis, but as the beginning of a new era in galactic culture, one where different paths of evolution were celebrated rather than judged, and where even the most transcendent beings could learn something from a simple bowl of soup. The Centauri-Proxima War had raged for 3 centuries before humans ever reached the stars. Two species, so similar in their evolution that they could have been cosmic siblings, locked in a conflict whose original cause had long since been forgotten. But its resolution would come from an unexpected source, a human chef named Marcus Wong and his traveling space diner. Marcus had converted an old cargo ship into what he called the Stellar Bistro, a restaurant that drifted between space stations and colonies. His specialty was fusion cuisine that combined Earth traditions with alien ingredients. What started as a novelty became something more when his ship found itself caught between Centauri and Proximan battle fleets. "If you're going to blast my restaurant out of existence," Marcus had transmitted to both fleets, "at least try my food first. Consider it a last meal if you must." It was an absurd request, but something in his calm demeanor made both sides pause. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps the sheer audacity of a human demanding that ancient enemies sit down to dinner together. Whatever the reason, representatives from both fleets agreed to board the stellar bistro. Marcus greeted them in his kitchen, surrounded by bubbling pots and sizzling pans. "Your species share 99.9% of your genetic makeup," Marcus said as he chopped vegetables from a dozen worlds. "You probably even share some taste preferences. Let's find out what else you have in common." The Centauri Admiral, Vierine, bristled at the suggestion. "We share nothing with these," but she fell silent as Marcus placed a steaming bowl before her. The aroma was unlike anything she had experienced in her 2 centuries of life. "This is based on an Earth dish called pho," Marcus explained, preparing another bowl for the Proximan commander, ZYX. "But I've adapted it using ingredients from both your worlds." The broth contains herbs from the Centauri highlands and roots from Proxima's southern continents. Together, they create something entirely new. The 2 leaders stared at their bowls, then at each other. Centuries of hatred waited the moment. Then, slowly, they began to eat. The effect was immediate and profound. Both leaders' bioluminescent patterns, which had been pulsing with aggression, shifted to remarkably similar frequencies of surprise and pleasure. "This taste," ZYX said slowly, "it reminds me of the healing broths my carrier made when I was a hatchling." Vierine's patterns flickered in shock. "You had healing broths too? My bearer used to make something similar." Marcus moved quietly through his kitchen, preparing more dishes while the 2 leaders began to talk. Each course revealed another shared memory, another common ground. A spiced grain dish sparked a discussion about harvest festivals. A fermented beverage led to the discovery that both species had similar coming-of-age ceremonies. Word spread through both fleets as more officers came aboard to investigate. Marcus's kitchen became neutral ground, where centuries of prejudice began to dissolve over shared meals and discovered commonalities. The breakthrough came during dessert. Marcus had prepared what he called a unity pudding, incorporating ceremonial ingredients from both cultures. As Vierine and ZYX tasted it, their bioluminescence synchronized perfectly, a phenomenon that hadn't been seen since the 2 species split. "Our ancestors," Vierine said quietly, "they must have shared meals like this once." "Before the split," ZYX agreed. "Before we forgot we were one people." The stellar bistro became the unlikely setting for peace negotiations. Traditional diplomacy had failed for centuries, but here, over bowls of fusion cuisine and shared memories of comfort food, progress was finally made. Marcus found himself promoted from chef to cultural advisor as both species began to explore their shared culinary heritage. Archaeological teams discovered ancient communal dining sites predating the split. Anthropologists traced the parallel evolution of their cooking techniques. What had begun as a desperate ploy to save his restaurant became a movement. The Galactic Council observed these developments with growing interest. The human practice of transforming meal preparation into a peace-building tool was unprecedented in galactic history. Species that had long dismissed Earth cuisine as primitive began to study it as a form of diplomatic technology. 1 year after the standoff at the Stellar Bistro, representatives from both species stood before the Galactic Council to announce not just a peace treaty, but a reunification initiative. The first joint project would be a culinary institute dedicated to preserving and exploring their shared gastronomic heritage. Through human eyes, Vierine announced to the council, "We learned to see our similarities rather than our differences." They showed us that sharing food is more than just sharing sustenance, it's sharing life itself. Marcus, watching from the gallery, smiled as he remembered something his grandmother had told him: food is the language of peace. When words fail, let people eat together. They'll find their common ground. The Stellar Bistro became a permanent fixture in neutral space between Centauri and Proxima territories. Its success spawned similar ventures across the galaxy as other species began to recognize the diplomatic potential of shared meals. More importantly, it marked a shift in how the galaxy viewed human contributions to interstellar society. Humanity's primitive attachment to physical food had evolved into something revolutionary, a tool for peace that worked where all other methods had failed. As Marcus trained a new generation of chefs in what was now called culinary diplomacy, he often thought about how the simplest human traditions could have the most profound impact. In a galaxy full of species that had transcended physical form, humanity's connection to food had become not a weakness, but a unique form of power, the power to bring people together, one meal at a time. 10 years after the Great Feast incident, the Galactic Council convened a special session to discuss what many were calling the human food revolution. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Assembly on Europa Station hummed with energy as representatives from hundreds of species gathered to hear the findings of a decade-long study on the impact of human food culture on interstellar society. Dr. Maya Patel, now director of the Interstellar Institute of Human Cultural Studies, stood before the assembly. Beside her were familiar faces: Commander Sarah Chin, whose morning coffee had started it all, NX Vera, the Solarian anthropologist who had first experienced the emotional depth of human cooking, Marcus Wong, whose fusion cuisine had brokered peace between ancient enemies, and Keiko Tanaka, whose small Tokyo restaurant had become a pillar of interspecies understanding. A decade ago, Maya began, many in this chamber viewed human attachment to physical food as a sign of our species' primitive nature. Today, we gather to recognize it as one of humanity's most sophisticated technologies, a technology of connection, of memory, of peace. The chamber's holoprojectors activated, displaying scenes from the past 10 years, quantum collective members manifesting physical forms to experience family dinners, Axiomite philosophers debating the metaphysics of taste, Vesperian colonies establishing their first restaurants, and countless moments of species coming together over shared meals. What we've discovered, Maya continued, is that human food culture represents not a failure to evolve beyond biological needs, but rather an evolution of those needs into something far more complex. We transformed simple sustenance into an art form, a diplomatic tool, and a means of preserving and transmitting culture. First calculator theorem, who had once been among humanity's harshest critics, floated forward. Their crystalline form had been modified to include what they called a taste appreciation matrix, a development that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Our species pursued transcendence through abandoning physical form, theorem announced. Humanity achieved it by embracing and transforming their physical nature. Both paths have led to advancement, but humanity's path has taught us something we had forgotten: the value of maintaining connections to our origins. The evidence was undeniable. Species that had reintroduced forms of physical eating reported stronger community bonds, better diplomatic relations, and even enhanced cognitive function. The Centauri Proximan peace continued to hold, their shared culinary heritage becoming the foundation for a renewed civilization. Keiko stepped forward next, her gray hair now completely white, but her eyes as warm as ever. In my restaurant, I have served beings of pure energy who cried over a bowl of ramen. I have watched crystalline entities discover joy in the simple act of sharing tea. What humans consider ordinary, the sharing of food, the passing down of recipes, the comfort of a home-cooked meal, these have become extraordinary tools for bringing the galaxy together. Commander Chen smiled, raising her ever-present coffee cup. Who would have thought that my coffee addiction would lead to all this? The chamber filled with the equivalent of laughter from dozens of species. The Galactic Council proceeded to formally recognize human food culture as a technologically significant achievement in sociological evolution. But the real impact went far beyond official recognition. Across the galaxy, species began to re-examine their own histories, looking for cultural practices they had abandoned in their rush toward technological advancement. Marcus Wong's Stellar Bistro had spawned a network of similar establishments, each becoming a hub for interspecies understanding. NX Bara had established an academy dedicated to studying the emotional and cultural aspects of food across species. Even the Axiomites had developed a new branch of mathematics dedicated to quantifying the ineffable qualities of taste and shared experience. Perhaps, Maya concluded, the most profound lesson we've learned is that advancement doesn't always mean leaving things behind. Sometimes it means taking what's simple and essential and transforming it into something extraordinary. Humanity didn't resist evolution by maintaining our connection to food. We evolved that connection into something that has changed the galaxy. As the session concluded, representatives from across the galaxy gathered not in formal discussion chambers, but in the station's numerous dining establishments. The sight would have been unimaginable a decade ago. Beings of pure energy sharing space with crystalline entities, insectoid species breaking bread with silicon-based life forms, all engaged in what had become known as human-style communion. In Keiko's newly opened Europa branch restaurant, a group of young diplomats from various species gathered around a steaming hot pot. As they shared the meal, they also shared stories, dreams, and ideas. The boundaries between species seemed to dissolve in the steam rising from the pot. You know, Keiko said to Maya as they watched the scene, when I was a girl, my grandmother told me that food was magic. It could turn strangers into friends, enemies into family. I never imagined she meant it could work across the entire galaxy. Maya smiled, watching as a young Axioimite attempted to use newly manufactured taste buds to experience sushi for the first time. That's the real achievement, isn't it? We didn't just maintain our food culture, we showed the galaxy that sometimes the most primitive things can become the most advanced when you infuse them with meaning and purpose. As the various species continued their meal, their different forms of bioluminescence, energy patterns, and crystalline structures began to synchronize unconsciously, a phenomenon that xenobiologists now called the communion effect. It was just one of many discoveries about how shared meals could create connections that transcended physical forms. The galaxy had changed and would continue to change, all because humans had insisted on making their basic needs into something more. What had once been seen as a limitation had become humanity's greatest gift to galactic society, the understanding that true advancement didn't mean abandoning the basic aspects of existence, but transforming them into bridges between worlds, species, and hearts. High above Europa, in the endless expanse of space, countless ships carried the new traditions across the stars. In each vessel, beings of all forms gathered to share what had once been mere sustenance, but had become something far more profound, a celebration of life itself, in all its beautiful inefficiency.